Welcome back to another episode of Daily English Dialogues. I'm your host, Anna, and I am absolutely delighted to have you joining us today on our YouTube channel. If you're looking to sharpen your English while picking up some life-changing habits, you are in the right place. As always, I'm sitting here with my good friend, Mark. Mark, you look remarkably caffeinated today. How are things?
You caught me, Anna. I've had 2 espressos already, so I'm feeling quite energetic. Though I have to be honest with you and our listeners, I almost lost that positive energy about 20 minutes ago on my way to the studio.
Oh no, what happened? Don't tell me it was the morning commute again.
You guessed it. It was absolute chaos on the main road. I was minding my own business, keeping a safe distance, when this bright red sports car suddenly swerved into my lane without even using a signal. He cut me off so sharply I had to slam on my brakes.
That is the worst. It's so jarring when someone is that inconsiderate on the road. What was your immediate reaction? Did the old Mark come out?
My initial instinct? Oh, it was classic. My heart started racing, my grip tightened on the steering wheel, and I actually reached for the horn to give him a piece of my mind. I wanted to yell, "Hey, watch where you're going." I felt this massive surge of adrenaline and irritation. I was ready to let that one stranger ruin my entire morning.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How one person we don't even know can trigger such a physical and emotional response in us. It's like we hand them the remote control to our mood.
Exactly. But then I remembered what we were planning to discuss today. I took a breath, kept my hands off the horn, and just let him drive away. I didn't flash my lights, I didn't tail him, I just chose to stay in my lane, literally and metaphorically.
That is impressive, Mark. And that brings us perfectly to the heart of today's topic. Don't react. Why not reacting is your superpower.
It sounds a bit strange at first, doesn't it? Usually we think of superpowers as being fast, strong, or highly reactive. We're taught from a young age to stand up for ourselves and react to injustice or annoyance.
Right. We often equate reacting with being strong or assertive. We feel that if we don't react, we're being weak or letting everyone walk all over us.
But today, we're going to flip that script. We're going to talk about why the person who stays calm is actually the one with all the power in the room.
I'm really looking forward to digging into this. I noticed that once I decided not to react to that driver earlier, my heart rate went back down almost instantly. If I had started a road rage battle, I'd probably still be shaking right now.
Precisely. It's about emotional preservation. So for all our intermediate and upper intermediate learners out there, pay close attention to the vocabulary we use today. We'll be using words like composure, impulse, detachment, and provocation.
Great words. So grab a cup of tea, find a comfortable spot, and let's dive into why silence can be louder than words. So, Mark, before we go any further, I think we need to clear the air. When we tell our listeners, don't react, we aren't suggesting they become cold, unfeeling robots or doormats who let everyone walk over them.
That's a really important distinction, Anna. I think a lot of people confuse not reacting with suppressing their feelings. You know, that stiff upper lip where you're screaming on the inside but pretending everything is fine on the outside?
Exactly. Suppression is actually quite unhealthy. It's like shaking a bottle of soda with the cap on. Eventually, the pressure gets too high and it explodes. What we're talking about is emotional detachment and composure. It's about being the observer of your emotions rather than the victim of them.
I like that, being an observer. It reminds me of watching a storm from inside a sturdy house. You can see the lightning, you can hear the thunder, but you aren't getting wet. You recognize that the storm is happening, but it doesn't change the temperature inside your home.
That is a beautiful metaphor. To put it more in technical terms for our English learners, the superpower lies in the gap between a stimulus, which is the thing that happens to you, and your response.
Right. Most people have a very narrow gap. The stimulus happens, maybe a snarky comment from a colleague, and the response is instantaneous. It's a reflex. They're defensive or angry before they've even processed the words.
Precisely. They are reacting. But when you widen that gap, you transition from reacting to responding. A reaction is an impulse. A response is a choice.
So the superpower is actually the freedom of choice. When I chose not to honk at that driver earlier, I was exercising my power to decide how my morning would go. If I had honked, I would have been letting his bad driving dictate my emotional state.
Spot on. You see, when you react immediately, you are essentially giving away your power. You're telling the other person, you have the key to my emotions. If you act a certain way, you can make me angry, sad, or frustrated.
It's almost like being a puppet on a string. Every time someone pulls the annoyance string, you dance.
Precisely. Non-reaction is about cutting those strings. It's the ultimate form of self-mastery. It signals to the world, and more importantly, to yourself, that your inner peace is not for sale. It's not something that can be disturbed by a rude email, a social media troll, or a grumpy neighbor.
It sounds like a very stoic way of living. I've been reading a bit about Stoicism lately, and they talk a lot about focusing only on what you can control.
It is very much aligned with that philosophy. You can't control the stimulus. The external world is unpredictable and often quite messy, but you have absolute authority over the response. That is why we call it a superpower. It's one of the few things in life that is entirely within your jurisdiction.
I'm starting to see how this applies to so many areas: work, relationships, even how we talk to ourselves. But I imagine it takes a lot of mental rewiring to get there.
It definitely does. It's a muscle that needs to be trained. And in the next part, we're going to look at the biology of why our brains make it so hard to stay calm in the first place. Now that we've defined the gap, we need to understand why it feels so physically difficult to keep it open. Why does our body feel like it's on fire when we're insulted? It all comes down to a fascinating psychological phenomenon called the amygdala hijack.
There's that term again. It sounds like something out of a neurobiology textbook, but it's actually a concept popularized by Daniel Goleman in his work on emotional intelligence. So Anna, give it to us straight. What is actually happening inside our skulls when we see red?
Well, think of your brain as a high-tech security system. Deep inside the temporal lobe, you have the amygdala. It's an almond-shaped cluster of nuclei that serves as your brain's alarm bell. Its primary job is to scan the environment for threats.
Okay, so back in the day, that would be a saber-toothed tiger or a rival tribe, right?
Exactly. When the amygdala detects a threat, it triggers an immediate fight, flight, or freeze response. It floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing becomes shallow, and your muscles tense up. You are prepared for a physical battle.
But here's the catch, isn't it? In 2026, we aren't usually running away from tigers. The threat today is usually a snide remark from a boss or someone disagreeing with us on the internet.
Spot on. The problem is that the amygdala cannot distinguish between a physical threat to your life and an emotional threat to your ego. To your brain, a sarcastic comment feels like a literal spear being thrown at you.
That explains so much. That's why I felt like I was in physical danger when that car cut me off. But why do we call it a hijack?
It's called a hijack because the amygdala is much faster than the logical part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. It's located right behind your forehead. It's the part of your brain responsible for reasoning, planning, and impulse control.
So it's like a race.
Precisely. Information reaches the amygdala milliseconds before it reaches the prefrontal cortex. During a hijack, the amygdala takes over and effectively shuts down the logical brain. You are literally incapable of thinking clearly because your brain has prioritized survival over logic.
This is such a light bulb moment for me, Anna. It means that when we react poorly, we are essentially functioning on manual override from our most primitive instincts. We aren't being mean or stupid in that moment. We are being reactive mammals.
That's a great way to put it. And this is why non-reaction is a superpower. By choosing not to react, you are giving your prefrontal cortex, the wise leader of your brain, the few extra seconds it needs to come online, assess the situation, and say, wait a minute, Mark, it's just a car. No one is hurt. There's no need to fight.
So by staying still, we are actually performing a high-level neurological feat. We are manually overriding millions of years of evolution.
Exactly. It's the ultimate form of cognitive control. When you don't react, you're essentially telling your amygdala, false alarm, I've got this. This lowers your stress hormones and allows you to handle the situation with finesse and diplomacy instead of raw aggression.
I love the word finesse. It sounds so much more elegant than screaming at a stranger. But I imagine this hijack happens so fast that most people don't even realize it's happening until the damage is done.
That is why self-awareness is the first step. You have to learn to recognize the physical signs, the sweaty palms, the tight chest, before you open your mouth. If you can catch the hijack while it's happening, you've already won half the battle.
Okay, Anna, I'm sold on the science. My prefrontal cortex is ready to take the wheel. But let's get practical. Life isn't just about traffic jams. It's about people. Specifically, people who know exactly which buttons to push to get a reaction out of us.
You're talking about those difficult personalities we all have in our lives, the energy vampires or the family members who seem to have a PhD in passive aggression.
Exactly. Let's set the scene. Imagine it's a holiday dinner. You've worked really hard all year, you're proud of your progress, and then a relative, let's call him Uncle Jim, looks at you and says, "So, are you still doing that little internet thing for a living? When are you going to get a real job with a pension?"
Oh, Uncle Jim is a classic. Now, in a reactive state, what does the average person do?
Well, the blood starts to simmer. I'd probably say something like, "Actually, Jim, my internet thing pays more than your real job ever did." Or, "Why do you always have to be so condescending?"
And what happens next?
Uncle Jim gets defensive, the rest of the table gets uncomfortable, the turkey tastes like cardboard, and I leave the dinner feeling exhausted and angry. Jim wins because he successfully disrupted my peace.
Precisely. You entered the arena he built for you. You accepted the invitation to a fight. Now, let's look at the superpower version of that interaction. Uncle Jim throws the insult. What do you do?
I take that deep breath we talked about. I let the words hang in the air for a second, and then I just smile.
Even better, you use neutral validation. You could say, I know it's a very different career path than what you're used to, Jim. It's certainly not for everyone. Could you pass the gravy?
The pass the gravy move. It's brilliant. You've acknowledged that he spoke, but you haven't given his words any weight. You've treated his insult like a comment about the weather.
Right, because by not reacting, you are sending a very clear, silent message. Your opinion of my life is not important enough to upset me. That is the ultimate power move. When you don't fight back, the other person's negativity has nowhere to land. It just falls to the floor.
It reminds me of that saying, arguments are like a game of catch. If you don't catch the ball, the game can't continue.
That's a perfect analogy. And it applies to friendships, too. Have you ever had a friend who is constantly venting or trying to pull you into their drama?
Oh, all the time. They call you up, and for 45 minutes, it's just a monologue of complaints about their boss, their partner, their hair.
And usually, we react by getting hooked. We start getting angry for them. We say, I can't believe they said that. You should tell them off. We take on their stress as if it's our own.
And then, when the call ends, I feel like I've just run a marathon. I'm completely drained.
That's because you reacted emotionally to their drama. The superpower here is compassionate detachment. You listen, you might say, that sounds like a tough situation, but you don't let your internal state change. You remain the mountain while their storm blows past.
It sounds almost selfish to some people, doesn't it? Like you don't care.
I'd argue it's the opposite. If you're also drowning in the storm, you can't help them. By staying calm and not reacting to the chaos, you provide a stable ground for them. You're being a better friend by not joining them in the mud.
I see. So it's about setting an emotional boundary. You can be present without being enmeshed.
Enmeshed. That is an excellent vocabulary word for our listeners. It means to be so involved in a complicated situation that it's hard to get out. Non-reaction is the antidote to enmeshment.
It's also about preserving your social capital. If you're known as the person who never loses their cool, people think twice before trying to provoke you. You become untrollable.
I love that term, untrollable. It's the highest rank you can achieve in the modern world. Whether it's Uncle Jim or an anonymous commenter on the internet, your lack of reaction is your shield. Now, Mark, let's shift gears and talk about the workplace. This is arguably where the superpower of non-reaction has the highest ROI, return on investment.
I can believe that. The office is basically a pressure cooker of different personalities, tight deadlines, and high stakes. It's the perfect environment for an amygdala hijack.
Exactly. In a professional setting, your reputation is built on how you handle pressure. Have you ever noticed that in movies, the most powerful person in the room is rarely the one shouting?
Definitely. It's usually the one sitting quietly at the end of the table, listening intently, while everyone else is arguing and waving their arms around.
That's because silence and composure signal executive presence. When you don't react to a crisis with panic, people instinctively look to you for guidance. If the captain isn't running for the lifeboats, the crew stays calm.
I had a manager once who was the master of this. We had a massive server crash right before a product launch. Everyone was losing their minds, pointing fingers, and looking for someone to blame. He just sat there, took a slow sip of his coffee, and said, "Okay, the situation has changed. What is our first logical step to recovery?"
That is a masterclass in non-reaction. By not joining the panic party, he forced everyone else to rise to his level of logic. He used his calm to neutralize the chaos.
It also helps with office politics, doesn't it? There's always that one colleague who tries to undermine you in meetings or take credit for your work.
Oh, absolutely. These people thrive on your reaction. If they say something snarky and you get defensive or angry, you look unstable or difficult to work with. You've essentially fallen into their trap.
So if they say, well, Mark's report was okay, but it lacked depth, and I respond with, I'd be happy to dive deeper into those specific metrics if you feel they are necessary for the next phase, I've basically turned their attack into a collaborative moment.
You've completely disarmed them. By not reacting to the insult, you've kept the focus on the work, not the ego. In the eyes of your peers and your bosses, you come across as the grown-up in the room.
It's almost like a chess match. If you react emotionally, you're playing their game. If you stay calm, you're making them play yours.
And let's talk about negotiations. Whether you're asking for a raise or closing a deal with a client, silence is your best friend. Most people are terrified of awkward silences. They feel the need to fill the gap with talk, often giving away too much information or lowering their price.
The first person to speak loses. I've heard that one before.
It's a classic negotiation tactic. If you can sit comfortably in silence after a proposal, you show that you aren't desperate. You show that you are in control of your impulses. That non-reaction can literally translate into thousands of dollars in your pocket.
It's funny because we often think we need to be fast in business, fast talkers, fast thinkers, but being slow to react seems to be the real competitive advantage.
It's the difference between being reactive and being strategic. A reactive person is always playing defense, responding to emails as they pop up, getting stressed by every tiny change. A strategic person uses non-reaction to filter out the noise and focus on the big picture.
I suppose it also helps prevent burnout. If I'm not emotionally investing in every single office drama or minor setback, I have so much more energy at the end of the day.
Exactly. You're protecting your mental bandwidth. You only have a finite amount of emotional energy each day. Why waste it on a rude email or a minor technical glitch? Save that energy for the creative problem solving that will actually get you promoted.
Well, Anna, I'm fully convinced that I need this superpower. I want the executive presence, and I definitely want to win the game of catch with Uncle Jim. But let's be real. When someone insults you, it feels like a physical punch. How do you actually find that gap when your body is screaming at you to fight back?
You've hit on the hardest part, Mark. This is where the rubber meets the road. You can't just think your way out of a reaction. You have to train your nervous system to handle the discomfort. We call this the art of the pause.
It sounds simple, but I bet it's like trying to hold back a flood with a toothpick.
At first, yes. But remember, the pause is a muscle. The first step is what I call body scanning. The moment you feel a trigger, maybe it's a notification on your phone or a specific tone of voice, don't look at the person, look at your body.
What am I looking for?
Physical cues. For most people, a reaction starts with a tightening in the chest, a clenching of the jaw, or a sudden heat in the face. These are the early warning signs of an amygdala hijack. If you can catch the physical sensation, you can prevent the verbal reaction.
Okay, so I feel my jaw clenching. I realize I'm about to snap at someone. What do I do with that pause? Just stand there awkwardly?
Well, an awkward silence is better than a hurtful comment. But no, you use a technique called the 5-second rule of emotional regulation. You count backwards. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Why backwards?
Because counting forward is a habit. You can do it without thinking. Counting backward requires your prefrontal cortex, the logical part of your brain we discussed earlier, to engage. You are literally waking up your rational mind while your emotional mind is trying to take over.
That's clever. It's like a reboot for the brain. What about breathing? I know it's a cliché, but does it actually work?
It's a cliche because it's biological magic, Mark. Specifically, you want to try box breathing. You inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold for 4.
I've heard Navy SEALs use that.
They do. It's designed to hack the nervous system. By forcing your breath into a slow, rhythmic pattern, you are sending a physical signal to your brain that says, we are not being chased by a predator. We are safe. Once the brain receives that safety signal, the urge to react diminishes.
So I've scanned my body, I've counted backwards, and I've taken a box breath. Now I have 5 seconds of silence. What should I be thinking during that time?
Ask yourself the 3 gates questions. This is an ancient bit of wisdom that is incredibly effective in modern life. Before you speak, ask, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind?
Wow, if I applied those 3 gates to my everyday speech, I'd probably be silent about 90% of the time.
Exactly. And that's the point. Most of our reactions fail at least 2 of those gates. They might be true, like telling someone they're being annoying, but they aren't necessary, and they definitely aren't kind.
So this pause is sounding more and more like a high-level filter. It catches the trash before it leaves your mouth.
Precisely. And here is a secret tip. If you're in a face-to-face argument and you need a pause but don't want to look weird, just take a slow sip of water. It's a natural, socially acceptable way to buy yourself 10 seconds of thinking time.
I love that. The water bottle shield. It gives you a physical reason to be silent while you process your 3 gates.
It's all about creating that space. Viktor Frankl, a famous psychiatrist, once said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom.
That's a powerful quote to end this section on. I'm going to practice my body scanning this afternoon, starting with how I feel when I see my to-do list.
So Anna, we've talked a lot about face-to-face interactions, but I think the biggest challenge for most of us, especially my generation, is the digital world. It feels like the internet was designed to keep us in a constant state of reaction.
You are 100% correct, Mark. In fact, it's not just a feeling, it's a business model. Many social media platforms use algorithms that prioritize high arousal emotions. That means content that makes you angry, outraged, or indignant gets shared the most.
So when I see a comment that is clearly wrong or offensive, and I feel that burning urge to type a 5-paragraph correction, I'm basically doing exactly what the platform wants me to do.
Precisely. You are providing engagement. Whether you're liking a post or having a heated argument in the comments section, it all looks the same to the algorithm. You are spending your time and your emotional energy on the app.
It's exhausting. I've found myself in keyboard wars at 2 a.m. with someone I've never met, living in a country I've never visited, over a topic that won't matter in 2 days. Why do we do it?
It's the righteousness trap. Our brains get a little hit of dopamine when we feel like we are right and someone else is wrong. We feel like we are defending the truth, but in reality, we're just falling for engagement bait.
Engagement bait. That's a great term. It's like a hook in the water, and I'm the fish that keeps biting it. So how do we apply our superpower of non-reaction when we're holding a smartphone?
It requires a different kind of pause. I call it the screen off strategy. When you read something that makes your blood boil, your first move shouldn't be to hit reply. It should be to put the phone face down.
That sounds incredibly difficult. The urge to set the record straight is so strong.
It is. But ask yourself this. Has anyone in the history of the internet ever changed their mind because a stranger shouted at them in a comment section?
Probably not. Usually it just makes both people dig their heels in further.
Exactly. So by not reacting, you aren't losing the argument. You are winning your time back. You are choosing to spend your evening with your family, or reading a book, or sleeping instead of feeding a troll.
Let's define troll for our listeners. We aren't talking about the creatures under the bridge, right?
Not quite. In internet slang, a troll is someone who intentionally posts inflammatory or offensive content just to provoke an emotional reaction. They don't actually care about the topic. They just want to see you get upset.
So if I react, I'm giving them exactly what they want. My anger is their reward.
Spot on. The best way to defeat a troll is through total silence. If they don't get a reaction, they get bored and move on. There's a famous saying online. Don't feed the trolls.
I love that. It makes me feel like I'm in control of the situation. It's not that I'm ignoring them because I'm afraid. I'm ignoring them because they aren't worth my data plan.
Exactly. And it goes beyond trolls. Think about FOMO, the fear of missing out. Sometimes we react to other people's highlight reels by feeling insecure or jealous.
Oh, I've definitely been there. Seeing someone's perfect vacation photos while I'm sitting at my desk eating a sad sandwich. My reaction is usually a bit of self-pity.
That's a reaction too. The superpower of non-reaction means looking at those photos and saying, that's nice for them, and moving on without letting it affect your self-worth. It's about being digitally resilient.
Digitally resilient. I like that. It's about building a wall between the screen and your soul.
Precisely. Your phone should be a tool that you use, not a remote control that uses you. If you can master the art of scrolling past the bait without biting, you'll find you have so much more mental clarity.
Well, Anna, we've covered a lot of ground, but I have to play devil's advocate for a second. If I'm at work or with my friends and I just don't react when someone is being rude or crossing a line, won't they just think I'm a doormat? Won't they think they can treat me however they want because I won't fight back?
That is perhaps the most common misconception about this entire philosophy. People equate silence with submission, but in reality, there is a massive difference between passive silence and strategic silence.
Okay, break that down for me. What does passive silence look like?
Passive silence comes from a place of fear. It's when you're quiet because you're afraid of conflict, or you're hoping the problem will just go away if you ignore it. That is a sign of weakness because you're letting the other person control the space while you shrink.
Right, that's the freeze response we talked about in the amygdala hijack.
Exactly. Strategic silence, on the other hand, comes from a place of sovereignty. You aren't quiet because you're afraid. You're quiet because you are evaluating the best way to handle the situation. You are choosing to not give the other person the reward of your emotional explosion.
So it's about the energy behind the silence. One feels like I'm hiding, and the other feels like I'm waiting.
Precisely. Think of a high-stakes poker player. They don't react when they have a bad hand, and they don't react when they have a great one. Is that weakness? No, it's a strategy to keep the opponent off balance.
That makes sense. But how do you eventually address the problem? If someone is consistently disrespectful, you can't just be a poker player forever.
This is where boundary setting comes in. The superpower isn't about never saying anything, it's about choosing when and how to say it. A reactive person yells in the moment and loses their credibility. A powerful person waits until the emotions have cooled down and then sets a firm boundary.
Can you give me an example of how that sounds?
Sure. Let's say a colleague interrupts you constantly in meetings. Instead of snapping, "Will you shut up and let me finish?" in front of everyone, you stay calm and finish your point when there's a gap. Then, later that day, you go to their office and say, "Hey, I've noticed a pattern where I get interrupted before I can finish my thoughts. I'd appreciate it if we could both ensure everyone gets a chance to speak. It'll make our meetings much more efficient."
Wow, that is so much more intimidating, in a good way, than shouting. You're being completely rational, calm, and professional. You're holding a mirror to their behavior.
Exactly. You've addressed the behavior without becoming part of the drama. You haven't reacted to their rudeness, you've responded to their lack of professionalism. That is assertiveness, which is the healthy middle ground between being a doormat and being an aggressor.
It's almost like you're the adult in the relationship. It reminds me of how a parent handles a toddler having a tantrum. The parent doesn't start screaming and rolling on the floor too.
Exactly. If the parent starts screaming, the toddler has won. The parent's superpower is their calm. By remaining still, they show the child that the tantrum has no power to change the situation.
I love that. So silence is actually a way of maintaining your dignity. When you react to someone's low-level behavior, you lower yourself to their level. When you stay calm, you stay on the high ground.
The high ground. That's the perfect way to put it. Silence isn't the absence of a response. It is a response in itself. It says, "I am too valuable to be dragged into this."
I'm starting to realize that the most powerful people are often the quietest. They don't feel the need to defend themselves against every little comment because they know who they are. Their self-worth isn't up for debate.
That is the ultimate goal, Mark. When your self-worth is internal, external provocations lose their teeth. They can't bite you because there's nothing for them to latch onto.
Okay, Anna, we've talked about the how-to and the why, but I'm curious about the long game. If I actually manage to stick with this, if I make non-reaction my default mode, what does that do to me as a person over the next year or two?
That's a profound question, Mark. We aren't just talking about a social trick here. We're talking about neuroplasticity. That's the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life.
Neuroplasticity. So I'm basically rewiring my brain.
Precisely. Every time you choose not to react to a minor irritation, you are weakening the neural pathway of irritation and strengthening the pathway of composure. Over time, the mountain mentality we talked about earlier becomes your natural state. You don't have to try as hard because your brain has been physically reshaped to be more resilient.
I love the idea that it gets easier. Right now it feels like I'm fighting an uphill battle against my own personality.
It feels that way because you're breaking a lifelong habit. But think about the long-term health benefits. Chronic reactivity keeps your body in a state of low-level stress. That means constant cortisol in your system, which we know leads to fatigue, poor sleep, and even a weakened immune system.
So by not yelling at the guy in the red sports car, I'm actually helping my heart and my sleep?
Absolutely. You're protecting your biological resources. But there's a social side to this resilience too. When you become untrollable, your relationships change. People stop trying to bait you into arguments because they know it won't work. You start attracting people who value peace and stability.
It's like a filter for your social circle. The people who love drama will find you boring and move on to someone more reactive, while the people who want deep, meaningful connections will be drawn to your calm.
Exactly. You become a safe harbor. In a world that is increasingly chaotic and loud, a person who can remain calm is a rare and valuable asset. You'll find that people start coming to you for advice, not because you have all the answers, but because they trust your perspective hasn't been clouded by emotion.
I've noticed that with some of the mentors I admire. They have this stillness about them. It's not that they're disconnected, it's that they're so grounded that the wind just doesn't move them.
That grounding is the essence of resilience. It also allows you to handle the truly big things in life. If you've spent months practicing non-reaction on small things, like a slow internet connection or a rude comment, you'll be much better prepared when a real crisis hits.
Like a training ground. If I can handle a broken coffee machine without losing my cool, I'm building the strength to handle a job loss or a personal tragedy with more grace.
Spot on. It's emotional weightlifting. You start with the light weights so that when life hands you the heavy ones, you don't snap. This leads to what psychologists call equanimity.
Equanimity? That's a beautiful word. What does it mean exactly?
It's mental calmness, composure, and evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. It's the ultimate end goal of this journey. It's the realization that while you cannot control the waves of life, you can learn how to surf.
I think that's a goal worth striving for. It's not about being perfect, it's about being steady.
And being steady is the most sustainable way to live. You stop burning through your energy on things that don't matter, and you start investing it in things that do. That, to me, is the definition of a superpower.
Anna, I have to say, this has been one of my favorite episodes. I feel like I've walked into this studio with a reactive mindset, and I'm leaving with a strategic one. But before we sign off, I know our listeners at Daily English Dialogues love a good challenge. How do we turn all this philosophy into action?
I'm so glad you asked, Mark. We don't want this to be just another nice talk that people forget 5 minutes after they hit stop. To truly master the English language and your own mind, you have to apply what you've learned.
So what's the plan? What is our homework for the week?
We're going to call this the 7-day non-reaction experiment. I want every listener to pick one specific trigger this week. It could be a slow computer, a messy roommate, a demanding boss, or even just a long line at the grocery store.
Just one? That sounds manageable.
Just one to start. When that trigger happens, I want you to perform 3 specific steps. 1, notice the sensation. Feel where the heat or tension starts in your body. 2, the silent count. Count backward from 5 to 1. 3, choose silence. Give yourself at least 10 seconds before you speak or act. Even if you eventually have to say something, wait for those 10 seconds.
I'm going to do this too. My trigger is definitely going to be inbox anxiety. When I see a notification for a difficult email, I'm going to use the water bottle shield we talked about earlier. I'll take a sip of water before I even click open.
That's a perfect example. And for our English learners, I have an extra challenge. In our YouTube comments section, I want you to write down what your trigger is and how it felt to not react. Use at least 3 of the vocabulary words we discussed today. Words like composure, equanimity, or stimulus.
That's a great way to practice. It's one thing to hear the words, but using them in context is how they really stick in your memory.
Exactly. And remember, everyone, the goal isn't to be perfect. You will react sometimes. You'll get frustrated, you'll snap, and you'll lose your cool. When that happens, don't beat yourself up. Just notice it and try again the next time.
Right. It's like learning a language. You're going to make grammar mistakes. The point is to keep talking and keep practicing.
Beautifully put, Mark. To wrap up today, your piece is a precious resource. Don't give it away for free to anyone who asks for it. Keep your superpower close.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Daily English Dialogues. This has been an incredible journey into the mind.
We'll be back next week with another conversation to help you navigate the world in English. Until then, stay calm, stay curious, and remember, your silence is your strength.
See you in the next one. Bye, everyone.